the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And Peter and I are hosting the show this evening. Hello, Pete. And he's actually pushing buttons right now. And we've got quite an action-packed show. First up on the show, we are going to be speaking with Tamar Hopkins, who is the former Principal Solicitor of Flemington, Kensington Community Legal Centre. We're going to be speaking about some shocking, and I mean recent shocking, police brutality incidents that have occurred over this year. And we'll speak about the broken police complaint system as well and about police investigating police. We have interviewed Tamar extensively on this show and have covered various cases, in particular a case called Haley Michael versus stontanditis, and which stemmed from allegations that the young men were regularly stopped by police for no legitimate policing reason and were subjected to racial discrimination, including assaults, abuse and racial profiling. We will be speaking about racial profiling, but basically during this interview, we're going to be speaking about the complaint system and how that's failing victims. After that, hopefully, we're going to be speaking with Wayne Muir, who is the CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, and we'll be speaking with him about the same topic, but in regards to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders. It's approximately 4:02, and Peter's going to put some music on while I line up Tamar.
This is Outright.
And you're back with the Doin' Time show, and that was Outright, who are a local, very outspoken and amazing band, singing a lot about feminist issues and political stuff. And it's approximately 4:06, and we're speaking now with Tamar Hopkins. I'd like to welcome her to the show. Welcome, Tamar.
Thanks, Marissa. Hi.
Thanks, Ma.
Yeah, Peter's here too, pushing
Hi,
buttons.
Pete. How you going?
Now, Tamar, I'm wondering, it's been interesting, hasn't it? The reason why we've invited you onto the show this evening is to talk about some of the latest things that have been happening with police brutality issues, and I believe that, you know, there's a broken complaint system here, isn't there? And you've been on this show many, many times, haven't you, talking about this? You've done extensive research.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about this and just give us a fresh update.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if your listeners have been updated since earlier this year. There has been an IBAC committee inquiry into policing in this state. The IBAC is the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission, and legislation has set it up to have a parliamentary committee that oversights how it operates. And after years of agitation, the committee this year has agreed to conduct an inquiry into whether or not IBAC is doing a good enough job with regard to police complaints. So earlier this year, the committee held a public inquiry into how IBAC was operating and heard from a large number of community legal centres and community groups and also people from the police about what was wrong, and the overwhelming suggestion from the community, recommendation from community groups, is that we needed an independent body to investigate complaints against police in Victoria, and that we had been calling for this for decades, and that if the IBAC committee really wanted to do something about fixing the problem of police brutality in Australia, in Victoria, one of the solutions is to independently investigate complaints. So it's really interesting that the timing of the recent age reports into what's been going on. But before we go to the recent reports, I just wanted to bring up an issue that occurred right over the time that the IBAC committee was hearing from members of the community, and that was that the Age did an investigation into a pseudonym used by Assistant Commissioner Brett Guerin on various forums, internet forums, where he engaged in vitriolic racist language and sexist, homophobic speech using a pseudonym, and was finally this came out after an Age expose into his conduct, and he immediately resigned as those details came out. So now the important thing to realise is that Assistant Commissioner Brett Guerin at the time was the head of Professional Standards Command. So that's the head of the body charged in Victoria Police with the investigation of complaints against police. So very, very significant that this kind of conduct was found in an officer of that standing. So
very significant. I was going to ask you about that, so it's really fantastic that you were able to bring that up because that's very useful. Yeah,
that's right. And it really goes deeply to the question of whether the Victorian public can have any faith in. We now have Assistant Commissioner Luke Cornelius heading up ethical standards and asking the public to trust Victoria Police once again with internally managing complaints by the public. And so he's asking the public to trust him and his organisation, and yet we are aware that his predecessor was engaged in, extraordinary levels of, completely lacked integrity in his job. And then we are also aware there's been a number of reports coming out from IBAC talking about the fact that police are not managing to investigate serious complaints against them effectively. There are, there's inherent conflicts of interest. They're failing to speak to witnesses, members of the public, not collecting all the right information. So these are reports coming out of institutions, government institutions, looking at the way Victoria Police investigate and finding serious deficiencies in how it's doing it. So this really is, just all of those facts alone are enough for us to seriously question and say, okay, enough is enough. It's time for the Victorian Parliament to get serious and do something to change this. And then we have this extraordinary set of reports that came out last week in The Age showing very graphic footage of what can only really be considered torture of vulnerable Victorians in horrendously vulnerable positions, being handcuffed and being abused for the satisfaction of the police officers who were present at the time. And really, it's just what's shocking about this is really not so much that there is footage of it, but that finally this footage is available for the public to see, and that these reports are reports that people have been saying again and again and again, but without the footage to demonstrate that that's what's been going on. So we really are at a crisis point in terms of the complaint system in Victoria at the moment.
It's very interesting because I like to actually have a look and do a lot of media reviews and research. And I get quite annoyed by the mainstream media, to be perfectly honest, because, we've got our show plugging away on all these stories, and the media has barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And it's only when things are sensationalised that things come up. Horvath, the case of Horvath, that wasn't looked at properly in the media, I believe.
Yes.
So it's interesting, just before you actually go into those reports, I think you've already mentioned this, but I wanted to just specify that Guerin is actually being investigated by the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission, isn't he?
That's right, yes.
So, and he was actually inciting or racial profiling against Africans and Italians.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So he had the Age reported on 2 internal complaints that had been made against Brett Guerin. One of them was a complaint that he called a fellow officer, and excuse my language, a wog, and that complaint didn't go anywhere. It certainly didn't affect his rise to a very high-level position within Victoria Police. But not only that, he was reported, and this is reported in the Age, to have said to a group of police officers at the Flemington police station, he was said to describe people as towel heads in 2006, at a time when Flemington was in a state of crisis. There had been, a huge level of racial profiling in the area reported to the legal centre, and our legal centre had been in the process of filing numerous complaints against the policing in the area. So the fact that Brett Guerin was brought into the Flemington police station as the superintendent of the region and made a statement like that to the local police. A police officer at the police station, Flemington police station, made a complaint about his language. But nevertheless, that complaint didn't stop his rise through the ranks to Assistant Commissioner of Professional Standards Command. So there's so many things that are deeply concerning
embedded
about, about what's going on, and it really kind of brings up, his role in kind of masterminding the lack of Victoria Police effective response to the entire complaint set of complaints that was going on in the Flemington region as the superintendent there. And we start, the penny really drops when you kind of hear all these complaints and you recognise his own attitudes as reflected in what he reported. One wonders, how on earth did this man get to such a level of importance within Victoria Police? And this cannot have been isolated.
No.
These complaints would not have been isolated. And that makes you think, well, just how normalised is this conduct? If it's so normalised that you could reach to Assistant Commissioner, then what? It's really deeply concerning about the entire culture.
I'm just really glad that you've mentioned this, because I've been wanting to interview someone about this for ages and haven't been able to get Lauren Caulfield in. She's been so busy from the Police Accountability Project. So it's good that we're able to discuss this, because it is terribly relevant, isn't it?
It really is.
To the whole saga, and I'm going to call it a saga, because the police complaint system is broken. If Ireland and other overseas countries can at least, I'm not saying that they're better than Australia, but at the very least they can have a reasonable complaint system. Yeah. So can we talk about these reports now, Tamar, just to set that in context? I believe that the Human Rights Law Centre have commented on this also, and there's been a lot of news stories, hasn't there, about excessive false, racist policing and other police misconduct. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so, just in the last week, there have been a number of reports by investigative journalist Nick McKenzie at The Age, where he spent the last few months working with legal centres and lawyers about their cases to explore not only the footage that they've been able to obtain in relation to their client stories, but also the backgrounds for those clients. So this was really the culmination of a lot of work putting together what was going on in those cases. And I guess so the one that that most people have seen and kind of has drawn the most shock was the treatment of disability pensioner John, whose psychiatrist had, or I think she was a psychiatrist, could have been some sort of social worker, called the police out of concern for his welfare, and police arrived at his house, and despite his call, his request for them to leave, and then he was okay, he didn't want them to come in, nevertheless demanded that he open the door, and when he finally opened the door and pushed them away in a very non-aggressive, it's just it was quite clear on the footage that he just didn't want them there. And no one was being attacked. And what's kind of interesting about these situations is that you see some kind of feeble response by some very ill person being treated as if it's the violent attack of a rampant criminal who is, could cause a huge amount of harm. So the overreaction by the police to this situation was extraordinary. He was taken to the ground, beaten, capsicum sprayed, handcuffed, and then sprayed in the face with a high pressure hose.
Oh, sounds like
over a long period. Yeah. And in fact, once he had been, that they stopped, a police officer said, "No, keep going, I want to get this on my footage, on my phone," and appeared to be taking images of the torture of this man with this high-pressure hose to the face. Now, it's unbearable to imagine what that must have felt like for that man, John. Yeah, this is akin to waterboarding, this sort of practice of what was going on. So there are no other words to describe it except for torture.
It is torture.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems like they didn't assess the situation. They just reacted, as you said.
That's right. And what it seems to be is that the slightest resistance or contempt for a police officer equals allows the police to have this incredibly overhanded reaction. It kind of validates an extraordinary display of brutality. It's amazing, isn't it? So these are really, and each one of these stories has someone showing a small amount of resistance to the officer that is then treated in this extraordinary overreaction and brutal way. So it's really, contempt of cop is not a crime. It's someone's kind of minor reaction to what's going on, somehow trying to assert themselves in a powerless situation, and yet the response that they receive is this kind of extraordinary brutality. So that's and what happened as a result of that is that initially, when that footage came out, Victoria Police said, well, we're reviewing the situation and IBAC will be investigating, but that's as far as it goes, and that those officers, they know that their supervisors will be more alert to them.
Is and
they
all?
were, at first they were content to keep them, retain them in the force.
Are you for real?
Yeah, that's right. So that was their initial reaction for a few days. And then finally, after considerable outcry from the community, Victoria Police agreed to suspend them.
Sorry.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's broken.
It shows it's shocking because really, if this hadn't been reported in the media, we wouldn't see this response. It shows you the importance of scrutiny, the importance of transparency, and the importance of media as an accountability tool. So, you and Pete there are part of this really critical accountability tool that our system needs to make things right. So, I'm so for the media and its role.
Look, I think it's really fantastic that the media reported on this issue. I think I commend the media.
Yeah.
However, I'd really like listeners to do a little exercise sometime. Listen to the Doing Time show, listen to that interview, have a look at how much detail that goes into, and then have a look at the channels on the TV, and they just they show the footage over and over again, the screams and the cries of torture, but it's not really explained about the complaint system. Yeah, they'll do short quotations from various lawyers, including yourself, but do they really go into a lot of detail? No.
Yeah.
But it is good, and I think it's great that you've described that. And look, we're going to be watching with interest about what happens with the complaint. I'm hoping it doesn't take 20 years to resolve.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, there's a whole lot of things going on. So obviously there is an IBAC investigation into those individual matters, but really importantly, the Victorian government should have its eyes wide open as to what's going on in this state, and that change is desperately needed. So one of the more concerning things that came out in the last week was Police Minister Lisa Neville's, I guess, inability to express any concern for the current state of police, and describing these incidents as kind of exceptional examples in a job that's really hard, really difficult. So very much taking a police association line in terms of looking at these problems, and echoing the claim that Luke Cornelius is saying that police need to be able to manage their own complaints. And in fact, Lisa Neville drew as an example the health, that hospitals investigate their own complaints against their own doctors. So now I don't know if that's actually true, but we have to really separate the difference between what the police do and what doctors do. The police are engaging in the complaints that are being made against them are complaints of criminality, and so they need to be investigated separate. I mean, we're talking about assaults, human rights abuses, daily human rights abuses. So these are so serious that they need external investigation. So
there's nothing though. There's no external, is there?
No, that's right.
In Victoria.
That's right.
I mean, I'm sure listeners are noticing that you're not speaking about solutions because there's none at the moment. Like, all we've got is IBAC, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
That's in their control, isn't it?
Yes, so this is an issue that the Victorian government can change by legislation, and what it needs to do is legislate to set up an independent body to investigate complaints against police. It would be possible to legislate to give IBAC the power to investigate all complaints against police. So that is possible, but many legal centres have expressed concern about the culture within IBAC itself. At this stage, IBAC does not consider itself to be a complaint handling body. Yeah. It really has been acting as a triage agency, and in fact, the head of IBAC made comments to the IBAC committee hearing suggesting that the police are the ones to continue investigating themselves. So that's really problematic, that our independent body, while noting that the police investigations of themselves are failing or are embedded with conflict of interest, is still not recommending to the government that it independently investigate. So to me, that shows a level of that somehow, I can't. Corruption is not the right word, but it's somehow become embedded within this attitude that police should be doing this. And where does that come from?
But it can lead up to corruption.
Right.
I mean, I know we have to be conservative sometimes in our language, Tamar. I understand we have to be cautious. But, it's fair to say, really, that when there is a failed complaint system, when there's a system where we're only looking at police investigating police, there's so many things that can happen. I mean, I'm even having a look here at, the clients of Robinson Gill lawyers, I believe.
Yeah.
That they were working with the young education employee, Jessie Scarlett Rhodes. Yeah. Are we allowed to speak about that or not?
Yes, absolutely.
Because she was handcuffed and hurled headfirst into a divvy van, wasn't she, causing
Yeah.
head injuries and a fractured nose.
That's right.
And charged by police after she made a complaint, and then had her complaint dismissed following a police internal investigation. I mean,
Yeah.
how is that fair? And I mentioned that example just to highlight that these complaints are often dismissed.
That's right. Absolutely. A tiny fraction of assault complaints are substantiated, like a tiny fraction. And certainly none by the Flemington Legal Centre that involved assault has been substantiated. So really, it's kind of like this impossible thing. It just doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean that's right. And the extraordinary thing in Jessie's case is that she went to the county court in a civil claim and was awarded $86,000 by the judge in compensation, and yet the complaint system dismissed her complaint. So it really shows that if you compare the way judges are assessing the story to how the complaint system is assessing it, you see that, one is independent, the judiciary, but the complaint system is absolutely not independent. It's there's an inherent conflict of interest there with police doing that job. And so that's why we're seeing these massively different results.
Exactly. And, it's good that the legal centres have gone together and done a media release about this, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, there's quotes here from Megan Fitzgerald, lawyer with the Fitzroy Legal Service. Lauren Caulfield from Flemington Kensington Community Legal Centre has made a quote. And also the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, amongst other lawyers.
That's
so
right.
It's good that people have gotten together.
That's right. And it's in fact, the Law Institute of Victoria are calling for independent investigations. We've got, the support for this goes well beyond the community legal sector. We've got commercial law firms, the peak body for lawyers across the state, youth groups.
Yep.
So it's a huge, broad coalition of people that don't necessarily always see eye to eye that are coming together on this point. So it really highlights the universality of what they're asking for, the absolute need for what they're asking for.
Absolutely. Keep up the good work, Tamar. Look, I know you're still doing quite a lot of extensive research about this, aren't you?
Yeah, and focusing on racial profiling.
Of course.
At the moment, yeah.
Of course, and that's really important. And we've discussed racial profiling quite a lot. We spoke about this today. But Tamar, we're running out of time. Are there any final comments that you wanted to make? We're going to be speaking hopefully with Wayne, who's the CEO of the Aboriginal Legal Service, Fitzroy Legal Service next.
That's great.
If he's available. But yeah, is there any final comments you wanted to make?
No, except that thanks again doing time show for continuing to follow this important issue, and and it would be good to talk to you when there are more updates.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
I hope we don't have to wait 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Tamar, thanks so much.
Okay,
Keep it up.
thank you.
Take care.
Tamar.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Tamar Hopkins, former Principal Solicitor from Flemington Kensington Community Legal Centre, speaking about police brutality and a broken police complaint system and about police investigating police and offering solutions for the fact that there needs to be an independent police complaint system. It's approximately 4:32, so we're hoping to line up Wayne soon from the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service.
We'll just put on a song from Spy vs. Spy, a great Australian band that was in the 80s, but I don't know what they're doing now. They're not around anymore, but they're a really good political band. You're back with the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:36, and we're going to be speaking with Wayne from the Muir, M-U-I-R, from the CEO. He's the CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. Hello, Wayne. Welcome to the program.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Hi, Wayne.
Again, Peter's here too. It's great to have you, Wayne. I've been trying to find you for months. You're working away there, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you tracked me down, which is good.
Absolutely. Now, Wayne, I'm wondering if you would like to comment, and it's a very unpleasant topic, but we have to discuss it. It has to be said. If you could talk about your views or what's happening, how it affects Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders in regards to the broken police complaint system.
Yeah, by all means. Look, I probably qualify my comments by saying I've worked with a lot of police officers in Victoria Police over the years, and there are many, many good police officers. However, we have a situation where the police complaints process is not working for all parties, and that's been evidenced by various IBAC reports, and there was one fairly recently. I think if the system was running as good as it was intended to run, then the Parliament wouldn't have necessarily called a parliamentary inquiry looking into this very matter. And I might add that the same matter has been picked up by the Australian Law Reform Commission's inquiry into over-incarceration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So it's a large issue. It's an issue not just in Victoria, it's an issue in all jurisdictions. And I guess to give evidence to our concerns, we recently reviewed in our submission to IBAC, we included data from a study that we conducted of our own police complaints files. That is, the matters that we put forward to IBAC and police with regard to complaints. Of the 22 complaints submitted by Aboriginal clients, not a single one was substantiated. Now, that strike rate's not terribly good, and we would suggest there's a problem with it. Now, let me fast forward to fairly recently. We lodged a complaint with Victoria Police regarding the conduct of a particular officer. I won't go into specifics because we're still pursuing this complaint. But suffice to say, police tell us they've got a conflict of interest process in place. Well, I would suggest in this circumstance the conflict of interest process didn't work or was deliberately overlooked. I don't know. But the officer assigned to investigate, through the investigation process, did inform us that, in fact, he'd served with the very officer he was investigating, and that he thought that fellow was a good bloke. I would suggest that sort of commentary doesn't lend itself to impartial and independent investigations, and that, in fact, it didn't surprise us when we got the report back from the police to say a complaint was not substantiated. So our 22 become 23. We know that under the current system, that the majority of complaints submitted, for example, to IBAC, about 90% of them go back to police to investigate. I don't have the magic wand to say what the process should be. What I would say is the current system is not adequately serving all parties involved.
Would it be fair to say, though, that, it's not just a case of one or two bad apples, is it? Or the occasional error. That, it's,
one of the
it's
things
a broken
that the
complaint
police,
system. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. One of the things that the police and sometimes the politicians point to is the lack of numbers of complaints. But if you have a society that is suspicious of the system in place, it does not have trust and faith in the system that's in place, then they will not engage with the system. So therefore the numbers in of themselves tell a story not of a lack of concern about police behaviour and conduct, but in fact it tells you a story of lack of faith that society generally has in the police complaints process.
But there's heaps of complaints. That's the thing. These politicians really try and camouflage, I believe, because there are just so many examples of, it's challenging, isn't it? The individuals tell their stories and they go against institutional power, particularly where there's been significant violence and structural disadvantage, and yet they're not offered protection outside the courtroom.
Well, we hear, and again it's anecdotal, but we have heard stories about when people have lodged complaints about police, that all of a sudden where there was almost no police patrols in the neighbourhood and past the individual's house, all of a sudden there are substantial patrols past an individual's house. We've heard anecdotal evidence of family members being stopped and questioned by police more regularly, in fact, for the first time in some cases, when that's never occurred before. Now,
does that apply to Aboriginal people
part
more,
of the problem
do you think?
is that people won't complain about that stuff
That's
because they say that there's a fear of intimidation and harassment. They say that they have no faith in the police complaint process actually delivering any results. And the sort of statistics and data that I just quoted before, and the statistics which the IBAC itself has found in a file audits of the complaint system, tell you that when there's only, and this is across the board, not just in the Aboriginal space, but when there's only 4% of the complaint is assault-related, and the outcomes are in that low percentage rate in terms of the substantiations, then people start to put the anecdotal stories about harassment and intimidation. They put the stories around about how there's little or no outcome, and in our file reviews, that's the case. Yeah. When I go to the point of our most recent example of a police officer openly saying to one of our lawyers that they'd served with the person they were investigating and that they thought that person was a good person, well, then it hardly surprises us that the report outcome says your complaint is not substantiated.
Thank you, Wayne.
The impartiality, the impartiality of the system is what's it. Is what is a concern for a lot of people at this point in time.
Look, absolutely, and I'm wondering because I mean, given the statistics that Aboriginal people are overrepresented in prisons, and there've been a lot of Aboriginal deaths in custody. Do you think, in your professional opinion as a CEO of an Aboriginal legal service, do you think that Aboriginal people are more marginalised and further impacted by the system?
I've been saying for some time that I think the issue of bias in the justice system needs to be looked at and addressed. I've said that on a number of occasions in a number of forums, and might I add, that same question has been covered to some extent in the Australian Law Reform Commission report as well. So it's not just me saying it.
No, of course not.
The Australian Law Reform Commission, it's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the community themselves, and there have been various other reports from the Ombudsman here in Victoria and others which point to a concern in this space as well.
Exactly, and in particular, when there has been a deeply traumatic history in terms of colonisation and about historically how police have been instrumental, haven't they, in racially profiling Aboriginal people. Now, I'm not saying all policemen are bad. I'm not actually attacking individuals at this time, but I am saying that the system does need to be altered where police are not investigating police.
I think you'd get quite a lot of support out there in the community that would agree with you, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, that there needs to be a system that can demonstrate that all participants in that system are playing on a level playing field, and that in fact that there is a lack of bias or conflicts of interest in that system, and currently we don't have the confidence that that's what's being provided to us.
Let's just hope, Wayne, that it changes. I mean, in overseas countries, it is totally different. For example, in Ireland.
Well, again, I just simply point to the fact that there's been a major national inquiry, and it's picked up on some of those very points that you talk to. And I would encourage the Victorian government and the Victorian Police Force to pick up on that inquiry and to think about ways that they can go about addressing those inquiry outcomes. That will go a long way to addressing a great number of our concerns, I believe.
Wayne, thanks so much. Are there any other final comments that you wanted to make? It's been great talking to you.
No, but we all hope that there comes a day that we're talking about a declining number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people coming into negative contact with the justice system. with corrections and with police and the courts, and that would be a good thing if we see that type of statistical outcome. That is a downturn in those things.
Absolutely, and also in agreeing with you, I also would go further and say that we're hoping that there's going to be some innovative programs to address stolen generation as well.
Absolutely, and to that effect, we are advocating and supporting our stolen generations peoples, and we are talking to the Victorian government with regard to an appropriate redress scheme for stolen generations people, and we will continue to advocate in that space as well. And we think there's more work that needs to be done in the early intervention and prevention space rather than waiting till problems get out of control and people then find themselves in difficult situations, bring themselves, unfortunately, into contact with the justice system. But we think if there's much more front-ended investment, long-term we'll see better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
It's very much connected, isn't it, Wayne?
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. We hope to have you
back. No worries, you're welcome.
Keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And we were just speaking with Wayne Muir from the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, and his position is CEO. It's approximately 4:48, and I believe we're going to be doing some more announcements and music.
Oh, we'll just put on Kev Carmody, Rivers of Tears.
Yeah, good lyrics. It's approximately 4:56, and this is a Doing Time show. We've got about a minute before we go, and Beyond Zero is up next. And so tune into that. Tune into the Doing Time show every Monday from 4 to 5 p.m. And we'll be back next week as usual. And just before we go, we wanted to thank our guests, both of them from Victoria. Thank you to Tamar Hopkins, and also thank you to Wayne from the Aboriginal Legal Service. And it was great to have you both on the show and to do some really, really good interviews about the police investigating police. And we're hoping that we're going to get more updates about what's going on. That's not going to take 20 years. So thanks a lot. Goodbye from Marissa.
See you all, everyone.
And take care of each other. See you next week.
Bye.
Black fella, white fella is up next.